death. It will inevitably affect all Xbox hard drives. Because of that, this is sadly my third Xbox in the last few years. So in this part of the Eric experiment, we're gonna go through my journey soft modding and replacing the hard drive on this Xbox so it doesn't have the same fate as the previous ones. So let's go, let's do it. Let's just do it.
Will be magnificent to behold.
I'd like to start with a little disclaimer. This video is not a tutorial. It might be helpful as it has some info and some particularities about my own experience replacing the hard drive on this Xbox, but it's mostly for entertainment purposes. With that in mind, I highly recommend that you check out an actual tutorial such as the Mr. Mario ones on the subject. They helped me a lot through this process. Now with that out of the way, let's get started. One of the issues with the original Xbox is that it uses a conventional spinning hard drive, and those are getting pretty old now and starting to fail. The problem with the Xbox is that the hard drive is locked with a key that is stored in the EEPROM of the console called HD key, which means that the hard drive is married to the motherboard, and when it dies, the console basically dies with it. You can actually fix it by doing a hardware mod that involves installing a mod chip onto the console's motherboard, but that's a bit beyond my soldering skills, and because of that, this is sadly the third Xbox I have owned in the last 3 or 4 years. I think there are other ways to extract the HD key from the EEPROM after a hard drive failure, but I haven't looked into that. This Xbox still had a working hard drive though, and since I didn't know for how long and because I didn't want it to have the same fate as the previous two, I ended up performing a soft mod on it. The soft mod uses a software exploit that allows us to install a different dashboard and software that gives us more control over the hardware and subsequently allows us to replace the hard drive later on. So this is how it went. I first set up the Xbox because I needed to prepare a flash drive on it that was used to copy the save files with the exploit that allows us to soft mod the Xbox. More on that later. After setting it up and turning it on for a quick check, I could get my USB to Xbox controller port adapter, connect the flash drive to it, and then connect it to the second controller port. After that, I needed to format the flash drive with the Xbox file system. In order to do that, I went into memory on the main menu, and after selecting OK in a message saying the memory unit wasn't working correctly and had been erased, I went into controller 2. There I selected erase and then confirmed it. After that, the flash drive was ready to have the save files copied into it. I first needed to download the necessary software to execute the soft mod though. As instructed in Mr. Mario's tutorial, I downloaded the Rocky 5 Xbox soft modding tool from its GitHub repo. And then, after that, I downloaded Explorer 360, which is the software that allowed me to copy the save files into the flash drive. More on that later. I then tried to run the batch file that prepares the save files with the soft modding tool, but for some reason that didn't work for me. The batch file would always get stuck regardless of me running it as an administrator or not. I tried to have a look into its contents to see if there was anything that I could change to make it work in my computer, but I couldn't see anything too obvious. Luckily though, after having a second look in the repo, I noticed that you can actually download a pre-built version of the tool, so I did just that. After downloading it and extracting the files, I plugged my flash drive on the computer. But Windows can't read the file system from Xbox memory cards, which we formatted the flash drive with. That's when Explorer 360 comes in. I thought I'd have to run it as an admin, but interestingly, it doesn't work as an admin for some reason. Now let's copy the files. On Explorer 360, I first opened the drive, then I specifically clicked on the partition I needed to copy the files to. We need to drag and drop the files in, and we can't do it if we don't click on the partition. When that was done, I just closed the drive, exited the program, and then ejected the flash drive from the computer. That was pretty much it in terms of copying the files. Now I just had to go back to the Xbox and actually execute the soft mod. After powering the Xbox on and plugging the flash drive onto it again, we need to copy the save files into the Xbox hard drive before we can use them, so I did just that. I did copy all of the save files to the hard drive, but realistically, I just needed to copy the softmodding tool and only the save file for the game I was using to run the exploit, which is Splinter Cell in my case. After I copied all of the save files, I quickly checked if they were on the hard drive and everything seemed okay. Alright, now that I had everything ready, I could finally pop the Splinter Cell disc in the DVD drive and execute the mod. Splinter Cell happens to be the game I own, but as you probably noticed, there are other games that you can use to run the exploit. The Mr. Mario tutorial goes into more details on how to do the soft mod using the other games, if those are the ones you happen to own. After I got to the main menu of the game, I selected Start Game and tried to load the Linux profile. Strangely, the first time I tried to do this, the screen went blank and I had to restart the console. But for some reason, the second try worked fine. I don't actually know what happened there, but if at any point the process freezes for you, trying it again might be all you need to get it going. After being greeted by the softmodding tool, I pressed A and the process started. The process ran pretty smoothly here, and after the setup was done, I got a few messages telling me a few things to keep in mind about the EEPROM backup and how I needed to create a new hard drive. I clicked I understand on them and finished the setup. I recommend that you pay a bit of attention to those things if you're trying this process yourself. After restarting the Xbox, the tool still needs to set up a few things, so I waited a bit more before the Xbox restarted again. Then he copied the new dashboard files and that was pretty much it. You can change the dashboard skin by going to Settings, Skins, and selecting a skin. I selected the default one because it's the closest one to the original home screen. Now there's an optional step here if you want to re-add the background sounds to the dashboard and install some other tools and homebrew apps by using the extras disc that comes with the soft modding tool. For more details on this part, I recommend going to the Mr. Mario tutorial. Just keep in mind that when I did this, I had to download the pre-built ISO for the extras disc because once again, the bash file that generates it didn't run at all. At this point, I was almost ready to actually replace the hard drive, but first I just needed to do one last thing. As I mentioned earlier, the hard drive key is registered in the EEPROM of the console, and the Xbox checks for it every time it boots up. So I needed to know that key in the EEPROM so the Xbox didn't block me from using a different hard drive. In order to do that, I went into Applications on the dashboard and then ran nkpatcher. If you don't see the nkpatcher in your Applications folder, you can install its shortcut by using the Extras DVD. In my case, I didn't need to do that, so I imagine you won't either. In the nkpatcher home screen, I went into EEPROM, then 2.1 Advanced Features, then I went into Hard Drive and selected Null Key. A disclaimer was shown, and after accepting it, the process to null the key started. After relocking the hard drive and backing up the modified EEPROM, we can restart the Xbox into the main dashboard. Now I was ready to replace the hard drive. In order to do it, we need to open the console. In order to do that, we need to remove the rubber feet from the bottom of the console and then remove 6 screws. As you can see here, the stickers on the bottom already had holes in them. That's because 2 of the screws are hidden behind them, and I had already opened my Xbox in the past to remove the clock capacitor because it was leaking. If you haven't done that, you should before your Xbox motherboard is damaged beyond repair. That's outside of the scope of this video though. To execute the hard drive replacement, we need to unscrew the CD and hard drive trays so we can access the IDE cable for them. The reason for that is that the process involves hot swapping the DVD drive with the new hard drive, as you'll see soon. After they are loose, we can start the hard drive replacement process. I initially tried to do this with an SSD because I wanted something that would last longer than a conventional hard drive. That didn't actually work, and I eventually used a newer 1TB conventional hard drive, as you'll see later on. I mean, my SSD wasn't in the hard drive compatibility list, but I figured that trying it anyway wouldn't hurt. Also, this is a SATA SSD drive, so we need a SATA to IDE adapter because the Xbox uses PATA. I got this one on eBay for a fairly cheap price a while back. After connecting it to the SSD, I changed the jumper in it to slave as it needs to be hot swapped with the DVD drive. I also needed a separate power supply for the new hard drive as the Xbox doesn't have enough Molex connectors for a third drive. Now, before continuing, I practiced swapping the IDE cable a couple of times as recommended by Mr. Mario because it needs to be done fairly quickly. After turning the Xbox on, we need to use a tool called Chimp Loader to execute the hard drive cloning. Now, for some reason, I had a brain fart when I was watching the Mr. Mario tutorial and I missed that I needed to install the Chimp Loader from the Extras DVD. So I did it the stupid and hard way. I downloaded the Chimp Loader from the internet and copied into the applications folder in the hard drive of the Xbox via FTP. While I was there, I made sure to back up my Xbox EEPROM just in case. Now I could run the Chimp Loader, but for some reason, the first time I tried to do it, the Xbox froze again. After restarting it and trying it again, it worked though. So when the message saying please connect the slave hard drive and press A appeared, I was ready to do the hot swap. I made sure the SSD was already powered on, and then I quickly removed the IDE cable from the DVD drive and connected it to the SSD. After that, I pressed A on the controller to start the process. Once I got to the first menu, I chose soft-modded Xbox because, you know, that's what we just did. I then selected yes in the subsequent message saying that they don't take any responsibility if I do something stupid, which is fair enough. I'm not going in depth here because Mr. Mario has gone into a lot of detail in his video, but I basically cloned the master hard drive, which is the original one, into the slave one, which is the one I just hot swapped with the DVD drive. I selected the partitions I wanted to clone, which were C and E, and then selected the appropriate option for the partition F for my 64GB SSD. After doing that, the drive was formatted, and the cloning process started. Now I just had to wait a few minutes. During the lifespan of the Xbox One, the original Xbox. How am I still confused by this after 7 years? Anyway, as I was saying, for most of the original Xbox lifespan, I actually owned a PS1. At the time, I remember that the idea of Microsoft releasing a video game console was actually pretty strange given that they were mostly known for computer software. My only contact with it around that time was at a video game shop in my hometown. I vaguely remember playing 007 Nightfire on it with a Duke controller. One thing that stuck with me was how big and uncomfortable that controller was at that time. Weirdly, I have tried it in recent years and I actually find it pretty comfortable now, probably because my hands are bigger now. But regardless, they're not as easy to find as the revised smaller controllers, which are still more comfortable than the Duke. Anyway, after the cloning was done, I was asked to lock the hard drive. After selecting yes, I went into scan physical ID devices to see if the SSD was locked, and here everything seemed fine. After that, I reconnected the DVD drive. I disconnected the original hard drive and connected the SSD in its place, making sure the jumper in the SATA adapter was set to master. Now, sadly, as I briefly mentioned earlier, for some reason the Xbox wouldn't boot with the SSD. It would always get stuck after the startup animation. I tried rebooting it, tried cloning the hard drive again, and nothing worked. I was a bit disappointed, but I decided to try it again with the conventional 1TB Western Digital hard drive I have. After executing the whole process again, this time it actually worked and I could boot into the Xbox using the new hard drive. You can see the partition sizes on the top left there. I don't know why the SSD didn't work, it's probably because this one isn't compatible with the Xbox, so maybe there are some SSDs out there that would work. Regardless, I'm happy enough to have the 1TB SATA hard drive in the Xbox, as it should still give me more longevity than the original hard drive because it's newer. The only annoying thing is that in a few years I'll have to replace the hard drive again. Luckily the process will be a bit easier because the Xbox is already soft modded. Anyways, time to reassemble the console now. So I first removed the old hard drive from the tray. Then I put the 1TB drive on it and screwed it in place. Then I put the DVD drive back in place and connected the power and IDE cable back to it. After that, I reconnected the SATA to IDE adapter to the hard drive. After that, I reconnected the IDE cable to the hard drive. Now, because this IDE cable isn't as long as the original one, I had to remove this old tab that held the old one in place, otherwise the Xbox wouldn't close. I decided to put a little piece of an anti-static bag between the drive and the adapter just in case. Then I connected the power to the hard drive. After that, I just had to screw the drive trays back in place. I put a little bit of tape on the IDE cable just to make sure it was in place while I was closing the console, and then I put the lid back on. Before screwing the case shut though, I just made sure to do one more test by powering the Xbox on. Everything seemed fine, so I turned it off, turned it upside down, and screwed those 6 screws back. After putting the rubber feet back on, I just tested it one more time to make sure nothing happened from over tightening the screws. If you watched the NES video, you will remember that I was getting some weird video artifacts because the screws were too tight. This time everything seemed fine though.
Get Tetris Worlds and Star Wars and Clone Wars, 2 months of Xbox Live and an Xbox for only what? Rated E to T. Xbox. It's good to play together.
And there you have it! This mod is great because I won't have to worry about my hard drive dying for a while. And even if it does, I should be able to redo the cloning as I'm storing the old hard drive safely. Having a soft modded Xbox with a big hard drive also means that I can rip my games into it for convenience and fast load times, or even install emulators on the console if I want to. It kinda sucks that I couldn't use the SSD though, but I might revisit this in the future and try to replace the drive with another SSD or some other storage solution. But that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future parts of this experiment. Thanks for watching.